Hi guys, and welcome to Unit 3, Lesson 6 and 7, Past Tense and Future Tense, okay? And I know that it may sound sort of weird because it's not, I haven't done this a lot of times where I combine two lessons together, but I believe that we can make this work, okay? So, we previously covered present tense, and I know that you studied some rules. So for past tense and future tense, you are going to be working pretty much the same way. All right. Before we get started, there are four things that I need you to do. And the first one is that I need you to find a quiet space without any distractions. Your TV should be turned off, as well as any other devices that you don't need to view this video. Number two, I need for you to have all your school supplies and materials ready. This includes pencils, pen, notebook, book, sticky notes, and or anything else that you would use for my class. You can pause this video, get your things, and then hit play when you're ready. Number three, I need you to please be seated and ready to learn, okay? And number four, I want you to create a working station, whether it's using a table or a desk. It is important for you to have a comfortable space in case you have to either write or take notes, which you're going to have to in this lesson. All right. So when we're talking about simple tenses, right, because we're still working with simple tenses, the past and future, there are simple tenses. So when we talk about simple tenses, the tense of a verb tells when it takes place. It refers to time, okay? And today, as I said before, we are going to cover past and future. Let's start with past. Okay, so the past tense tells that something has already happened. It usually ends with ed, and I say usually because there are two types of verbs in the past tense. We have the regular verbs, which is the ones that we'll be studying today, and then we have the irregular verbs, such as eat, ate, speak, spoke. These are the verbs that the spelling changes. They're called irregular verbs, but we will not be covering that material. That will be we're going to cover that in the next lesson. Okay. So the past tense of the verb be is was or were, and that depends on the subject. So if the subject is singular, we say, for example, let's say that the subject is he, we say he was, okay? And if the subject is plural, then we would say, if the subject was, let's say, they were, okay? So let's talk about the future. The future tense tells that something is going to happen. It is usually formed with the helping verb will or shall, but shall is often only used with I or we, and it's rarely used, so we're going to stick to will, okay? So this is like a brief explanation of the simple tenses past and future, and I hope that you guys are getting this so far, okay? So when we talk about future, past and future tenses, and this is where you want to take notes, okay? And because you already have your notebook and your pencils and all of the materials that you guys will need, you can start taking notes immediately. Love it. So when we're talking about the past tense, there are four rules that we have to remember, that we have to study. And the more you work with these rules, the better it will be. They will somehow sound a bit familiar because you already had some rules for the present tense. But the only thing that it will change is going to be the ending. The ending of past tense verbs is going to be completely different than those that end that are present tense, of course. Okay, so there are four rules that we have to learn, and what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video right now, and I want you to copy these rules for forming the past tense, and I also want you to copy the yellow rectangle that talks about the future tense. Okay, so now that you've copied the rules for forming the tense, you paused it, you copied not only the rules, but you also copied the examples, and you also copied the future tense also adding the examples, let's talk about these verbs. Okay, so rule number one. Rule number one states that to most verbs, you are going to add ed, right? Okay, so we have play, played, suggest, suggested, and this, the ones on the left side, these are the verbs in the base form, and the ones on the right side are the verbs that are already in your past tense form. So this is what we're going to do to the majority of the verbs. We are going to add ed to form the past tense. Now, remember that these are called the regular verbs, okay? They're also the irregular verbs, but we don't have to worry about those irregular verbs for this lesson. So verbs that end with ed, you're forming to form the past tense, you'd have to use to most verbs, you add ed. So we have play, we could have jump, jumped. There's so many that maybe you guys can think of as we're talking together, but to the majority of the verb to form the past tense, this is what we have to do. We're going to add ed. Okay, and then here we have the second rule, and let me just give you a little arrow so that you know where we are. So now we are covering rule number two. And rule number two talks about verbs ending with E. And it says that verbs ending with E, you drop the final E and add ed. And I know it's a silly one because why not just add a D? I need for you to remember this rule as I'm telling you, because when we continue to form different forms of the verb, this is going to be very useful that you remember that you drop the E and then you add ed, in this case because we're forming the past tense. So verbs such as believe, hope, love, these are all verbs that end with E. You look at the ending and it ends with E, so we follow the rule that states that we drop the E and then we add ed. Notice how these verbs, they do not have a double E at the end because you have to drop the E, okay? So far we've covered rule number one and rule number two. Let's continue with rule number three. Now, rule number three, states that verbs ending with a consonant in Y, you change the Y to I and add ed. And again, this is going to sound very familiar to the rule that you had also for the present tense, but please don't get mixed up and don't forget that for the past, you have to add ed. So let's look at the examples that we have. We have study and we have hurry. We can easily identify that study and hurry are verbs that end in Y, right? It's easy to identify it. But not only do you have to identify that it ends with a Y, but you also have to look at the letter before the Y. In study, the letter before Y is D. Now you have to ask yourself, is D a consonant Y? Because don't forget that the rule clearly states and specifically states that it has to be consonant in Y, not vowel in Y, consonant in Y. So once you identify that study is indeed a verb that ends with a consonant in Y, then you change the Y to I, and then you add ed, such as studied, okay? So same thing with hurry. Hurry, you identify the Y, you see the Y, here it is. Now you have to look at the letter before the Y. Let's look at this one right here. Is this a vowel or is it a consonant? I hope that by now you know that letter R is a consonant. So hurry is a verb that ends in consonants in Y, and this is why we have to change Y to I, and then we add ed. Okay? Now don't get confused. Again, consonant and Y. If you take a minute and you look at verb play, play is also a verb that ends in Y. But when you look at the letter before the Y, which is A, you realize that A is a vowel. It's not a consonant. So that's why you don't have to change the Y to I, that you only do that if it's a consonant in Y. If you have a verb that ends in vowel and Y, all you have to do is follow rule number 1 and add a D. Okay? Just wanted to clear that out. Okay. So let's go to rule number 4. And here we are. And for rule number 4, I am going to ask that you have a paper or your notebook with sticky notes, because I need for you to I want you to write some things out, things that you have to look for, okay? And I'm going to write here rule number 4, because everything that we are going to write here applies to rule number 4. Okay, so let's read rule number 4. It says, one-syllable verbs ending with a single vowel and a consonant, you double the final consonant and add a D. So there are 3 things that I want you to look for when you're working with this, just to double check that you do have to double the consonant, okay? These are the 3 things that you need to find in this one word to know for sure that you have to double the consonant. Now, this rule does not apply for verbs ending in X or Y. Notice that these 2 letters have vowel sounds, so they have separate rules. So if you find a verb that ends with X or Y, please don't get confused and do not use rule number 4, because it does not apply, okay? If you have a verb that ends with X or with X, then you would have to follow rule number 1. If you have a verb that ends in, well, if it ends in Y, then we have rule number 3, a consonant in Y. But if it ends in vowel and Y, again, you are going to use rule number 1. Okay, so let's talk about the 3 things that you have to look for in a word in order to know for sure that you have to double the consonant. Okay, the first thing that you have to do is see if it's a 1-syllable, and you should be writing, okay? These are the 3 things that you need to look for. So 1-syllable word, and go ahead and draw a little box next to 1-syllable word. So every time you work with words that you think that you might need to double the consonant, these are the 3 things. So you can just put a little check mark next to it so that you know, okay, it has this, we're heading in the right direction, sort of, okay? So they have to be 1-syllable words. So in the examples here, we have stop and we have plan. And I hope that you remember, because we worked dividing words into syllables, and you've also done it with Señora Nieves in Spanish class. But for those of you that maybe you've forgotten, let's just practice. Let's use the word stop, for example. What I want you to do is I want you to snap your fingers as you're saying the word and count how many times are you snapping your fingers, okay? Are you ready? Let's try it out. Stop. Let's do it again. Stop. How many times did you snap your fingers? If you said 1, then it's correct. It's only 1, which means that stop is a 1-syllable word. So in the box that I told you to draw next to 1-syllable word, you do like a little check mark. That means that, okay, it's a 1-syllable word, I'm heading in the right direction, but I'm not done. There are 2 other things that I have to look for to decide if, or to be sure that this word, this verb, I need to double the consonant to form the past. So another thing that you have to look for is 1 vowel. Here we go. 1 vowel. And for those of you that are still having some problems with your vowels, not my pumpkins, but just in case, these are your vowels. A, E, I, O, U. The rest of the letters in the alphabet, those are your consonants, okay? So I want you to look at the word stop. And I want you to count How many vowels do you see in that word? Okay, stop only has one vowel, which is O. So next to where you wrote one vowel, and you can even write the vowels out, I want you to draw a box or a square, and I want you to put a little check mark next to it, meaning that, okay, I did it. It's a one syllable word. It has only one vowel. So far we are heading in the right direction. It seems like I may need to double the consonant for this word to form the past tense, but I still have to check for one more thing. And the one more thing that you have to check for is that it ends in vowel plus vowel and consonant. So go ahead and write it down. Vowel and the little cross here that I wrote means and. So let me not confuse you. Vowel and consonant. So now we're working with the verb stop. So let's do this. Stop, stop. S. S is a consonant. T is a consonant. O is a vowel. P is a consonant. Oh, what do you know? Look, right there. The word stop is a word that ends in vowel and consonant. So in that box that you drew next to vowel and consonant, you can also do a check mark. So the word stop is a one syllable word. It has one vowel and it ends with vowel consonant. Let me write here ends in vowel consonant. Because when that happens, then you need to, because all of these three things are, you put a little check mark next to it, which means that it has all of these three things, then stop, you double the consonant, the last consonant, which is P, you double the P, and then you add ED. And that's how you would form the past tense. Okay? Are you guys with me? So I need you to copy this. It's right there. You could just pause it and then we can continue. Perfect. Okay. So now that we've covered the 4 rules for past tense, now all you have to do is practice. You have to study these rules, and the more you practice, the better you will become. If you want, you can add an additional example. Here on the chart, they only give you 2 examples, but you can go ahead and add a third one just to feel that you're getting the hang of this. Okay, so now that we're done with the past tense, let's go to the future tense. And the future tense is very simple, but I need you to understand that to form the future tense, you have to use the basic form of the verb with the helping verb will or shall. Shall is mostly used with I or we, and it's rarely used, so we are going to focus on with the helping verb will. So what does that mean? The basic form of the verb with the helping verb will. Let's look at the first example. Hop, it's the base form, and they formed the future tense by adding will, and then they kept the main verb. Don't forget that this is a verb phrase. When you have a helping verb and a main verb together, or even separated, like in questions, when you have in a sentence a helping verb and a main verb, it is a verb phrase. So in this case, to form the future tense, we have the helping verb will, but the main verb has to be kept in its base form. So will hop, will fly. In this case, they used shall, but I'm not a fan of it. I just want you to know that you can use it, but I'm not really a fan of it. So if we were to change all of these verbs that we practiced for the past tense, if we had to change all of these into the future, we would say will play, will suggest, will believe, will hope, will study, will hurry, will stop, will plan. Okay, so we kept, the only thing that we added was what? We only added, let's do this here so that you guys can see it, will. And just by adding will to it, oh, too small, and you put it next to it, Now we have will play, or will suggest, or will believe, or will hope, or will study, and will hurry. Okay, the same thing. But it's important that you understand this. Okay, so a future tense, it's always going to be a verb phrase. It's always going to have the word will, and the verb is going to be in its base form. All right. So let me get rid of this, and let's continue. So now let's practice. What is the past and future tense of each verb? And I have 10 verbs. The book has a bit more. The book gives 15. But if we at least practice with 2 of each for each of the rules for the past tense, and the future tense is a piece of cake. So with 10 is enough, okay? So right here, let me just do this. Mrs. Villalmosa made a mistake there, so let's fix it. Okay, so now, if we, let's read the directions. What is the past and the future tense of each verb? And not only are we going to, especially with the past tense, but we're going to work on it together, okay? And for the past tense, I want you to add the rule number that you used to form the past tense. So number 1, watch. I know that some of you have already noticed that watch has the specific ending that goes with a specific rule, right? Okay, so most of you noticed that watch, right, ends with CH. Did you see that? Okay, if you did, then you know what rule to use. And you should be using rule number 2 that states that to verbs ending in S, X, Z, SH, CH, we are going to add ED. So watched is the past tense for watch, okay? And as I said before, we use it, we want to go back to the rules, we can go back to the rules. And, oh, wait a minute, it actually doesn't have a rule for this one here. Huh. Okay, but we know that, I have to check on that because it's supposed to include verbs ending with, but anyways, in this case, we would just add ED to it. Okay, so it doesn't have a specific one, but we already know those, we already know that rule. So in this case, it would just be number 1, okay? So this would be rule number 1. And then the future tense, we said that we were going to add the helping verb will, and then watch is kept in its base form. Okay. So then we go to verb number 2. Number 2. And then we immediately see that it ends with a Y. And we have a rule that talks about that, right? Verbs ending with a consonant in Y. So we have to be sure that cry, we already know that it ends with Y. We just have to double check that it ends with a consonant Y. So we look at the letter before the Y, and we see that it's a consonant. So we know that we have to change the Y to I and then add ED. And we're using rule number 3. And I'm checking now because I'm also working with the 6th graders, and the rules tend to change just a little bit, the numbers of them. So I don't want to confuse you guys. So it'd be rule number 3. And then for future tense, we know that we have to use the helping verb will and then use cry in its base form. Okay? I hope that you guys are with me. Okay. So let's go to number 3. In number 3, we look at the word store. Capital letters are driving me crazy. I'm just fixing them. Okay. So we look at number 3, and immediately you notice that store is a verb that ends with E. So you go back to the rules, and is there a rule that talks about verbs ending with E? There's actually one. So there's rule number 2 that says verbs ending with E, drop the final E and add ED. So we go here, and it says to drop the final E. So, okay, we drop it and then we add ED. Perfect. And this is rule number 2 according to this table that we're using. Okay. And to form the future tense, you add will, and then you use the verb as it is in its base form. You keep it just like that, and then you write will store. Okay. So then we go to number 4. And when we look at number 4, we're having a little bit, we have some questions, some doubts. We have no idea what it is that we have to do. So if you come across a verb where you have no idea what you have to do, it would be good to do the process of elimination to eliminate possible wrong or incorrect rules to use. So again, we go back, we look at review, and we come here. We don't know if we just have to add ed. We're confused with this one. So we're going to look to see if rule number 2, it would be a rule that we can use for review. But this rule is specifically for verbs ending with E. So I eliminate it because I know for sure that I cannot use it. So I go to rule number 3. And it talks about verbs ending with a consonant and Y. And when you look at the word review, review does not end with a consonant and Y. So I eliminate rule number 3 as well because I know that I cannot use it. And then I go to rule number 4. It talks about one syllable verbs ending with a single vowel and a consonant. So let's see, review. Oh, nope. Review is a 2-syllable word. So I immediately know that I cannot use rule number 4. So if I've already eliminated 2, I eliminated 3, and I eliminated 4, that means that rule number 1 is the only rule that I can use for this one. So I know that the only thing I have to do is add ed, and this is rule number 1. And the capital light, it's driving me crazy. Okay, so then we form the future tense, which is the helping verb will and the verb in its base form. And I know that there's a way where I can just set it so it doesn't capitalize the first, but I really don't know how to do it, so just bear with me. Okay, so we go to dance, and we immediately notice that dance is a verb that ends with E, and I know that I have a rule that covers this verb. You can look at previous examples that we work with, such as store, or you could just go back to the table if you want and look at the rules again and read it, okay? Verbs ending with E, drop the E. Okay, so I know what to do. So I come here, and then I drop the E, and then I add ed. And then I know that I'm using rule number 2, okay? And then we go to the future tense, and we know that we have to use the helping verb will or shall, but because I'm not a fan of shall, we're just going to keep it with will. And we use the base form of the verb, so it goes to will dance. And then we continue with spray. Now, I look at spray, and I'm like, oh, I know that there's a rule for verbs ending in Y. I know it. Let me double check it. Let's see. Yep, here we go. Rule number 3 talks about verbs ending with a consonant in Y. So let me go back to this verb and double check. Spray. It ends with Y. Oh, there it is. Okay. But now I need to look at the letter before it to see if I can use the rule or not. And when I look at the letter before the Y, I notice that A is a vowel. So the rule clearly and specifically states consonant in Y. So I cannot use rule number 3. Remember that when you have a verb that ends in vowel in Y, you're just going to follow rule number 1, okay? So rule number 1, and I'm going to highlight it because I know that you have to be super careful with those verbs ending in Y. And then we form the future tense. We add will, and then we keep the verb in its base form. Okay. So then we go to zip. Zip is our number 7, and we look at zip, and we notice immediately, we're like, that's a very short verb. Let's see. What do I do with this one? Let's see. Zip. Oh, zip It's a one syllable word. So I am heading in the direction of this rule right here, right? Rule number 4, and you're looking at the list that I asked you to write, and you're looking at 3 things, right? Just to be sure that you have to double the consonant or not. So number 1 says one syllable word. So I noted that zip is a one syllable word. So I put a little check mark, but I'm not done. I can't make a decision based on just that. I have to look for 2 other things. So then I go to the second, to number 2, and number 2 says one vowel. Okay, let me see. I look at the word zip, and I'm checking to see, is there only one vowel in the word zip? Yes, there's only one vowel in the word zip, which is I. You see it right here. Okay, but I'm not done yet. It's heading in the right direction. It seems like I might need to double the consonant for this verb, but I'm not 100% sure just yet. There's one more thing that I have to look for. I have to look and see if it ends in vowel consonant. Does it end in vowel consonant? So we have consonant, vowel, consonant. Yes, zip also ends in vowel consonant. So the word zip is a one syllable word with one vowel that ends in vowel consonant. What does that mean? That means that I am going to double that last consonant and then I'm going to add ed. And we are following, what rule is this? In this chart, it's rule number 4, okay? But did you notice the 3 things that I looked for when I did this, right? And I'm going to highlight the consonants because we have to remember that we double the consonant for that one. Okay. And now we have to form the future tense, excuse me. So we add the helping verb will, and we keep the verb in its base form. Are you guys with me? Okay. And I want you to do the same thing. I want you to add the rule numbers for the past tense. Okay, so we go to number 8, and number 8 is yell. Those of you may already know, immediately know that we form it by adding the ed. But if you want to go through the process of elimination and just go over rules 2, 3, and 4, you guys can do it, okay? There's no problem with that. So we followed rule number 1 for this one. And then now we're forming the future tense. We add the helping verb will, and we keep yell in its base form. Awesome. We're almost done, guys. Okay, so now we look at the next word and we have scrub. Okay, scrub. Oh, scrub. Okay. I don't know what I have to do here. I know for a fact, and then I go back to my rules. I don't know if I have to use number 1. I know for sure that I cannot use rule number 2 because scrub is not a verb that ends with E. So I know for a fact that I can cross this one out. I'm not going to use it for this word. I also know that I'm not going to use rule number 3 because rule number 3 specifically talks about verbs ending with a consonant and Y. So it's between rule 1 and rule 4, but to be sure, there are things that I can look for to decide if I have to double the consonant or no. Okay, so let's see. Let's go back to the chart and you look at scrub. And the first thing on the list to double check whether you have to double the consonant or not is a one syllable word. So let's find out if scrub is a one syllable word. Snap your fingers as you're saying the word. Scrub. Do it again. Scrub. Scrub is a one syllable word, so you could just do a little check mark next to it. Okay, good. Now there's a second thing that we have to look for. You have to see, does the word scrub have only one vowel? And when you look at the word scrub, look, it only has U. So check mark, it does have, it seems to be heading towards rule number 4, doesn't it? Okay, but now there's one more thing that we have to find. We have to find whether it ends with vowel consonant. And as I highlighted here, we already know that this is a vowel, and the letter here, letter B, is a consonant. So scrub does end in vowel consonant. So what does that mean? Because it is a one-syllable word, it also has a single vowel. That means that there's only one vowel, and it ends in vowel consonant. That means that we do have to double the consonant. Oops, there we go. And then add ed. And I'm going to highlight the consonants so that we know, yes, we did double the consonant here, and we are using rule number 4 according to this table. And now we form the future. We add will because it's the helping verb, and then we keep scrub in its base form, and then we formed the future tense, will scrub. Now let's go to number 10. This is our last example. And immediately you look at the word marry and you realize and you recognize, that it's a verb that ends in Y, right? So because it is a noun that ends in Y, give me a second, I'm trying to, okay, there we go. Because it is a verb that ends in Y, we have to check. We already know that there is a rule, and you can look at previous ones. There's a rule that says that verbs ending in a consonant in Y, we change the Y to I and add ed. We change the Y to I and add ed. So we look at marry, and you see, you already identified that it ends with a Y. So now you look at the letter before it, and you identify R as a consonant. So you're like, yep, it ends in consonant Y. So I change the Y to I, and then I add ed. And this is rule number 3, according to this table that we're using now. And then we form the present tense, the future tense by adding the helping verb will, and we keep marry in its base form. So now it's will marry. Perfect. Okay, so now that we've done that, and I hope that you guys are with me and that you understand this, because you're going to have to do the same. You're going to have to do the same thing with your practice, with your homework. Okay. Now, you guys are going to work on your extra practice page, page 141, but you are going to follow these directions, okay? So you can either write these directions down, you could take a picture of it with your phone, but these are the rules that we're going to follow. Why? Because I combined the 2 lessons together. This is not just past tense, we're also working with future tense as well. So I changed the rules just a little bit, but not too much. In the circle part, you are going to write the past tense and the future tense of the verbs in the sentences. So for example, Bonita walked, and I made a mistake here, should be walk. Bonita walks quickly, here we go, apologize. Bonita walks quickly down the hall. And then it says that you're going to write the past tense and the future tense verbs in these sentences. Guys, I want you to do this on a loosely paper or in your notebook. I do not want you to print the paper out. I do not want you to work on the document. I want you to write the answers out, okay? So for the square part, you're pretty much doing answers only. Look at the example, look at the answers. Because you had to write the past tense and the future tense, Bonita walks quickly down the hall, you identified that walks is the verb in the sentence because it's the word that shows the action. It's the word that tells you what the subject is doing. She walks. So you change it to the past tense, and then you change it to the future tense. Piece of cake. Super easy, right? Okay. So then you're going to go to the triangle part. And in the extra practice, the circle has six sentences. So you're going to be doing the circle. You have 6 sentences. You're going to read it. You're going to identify it wasn't incorrect. I'm sorry. It wasn't. Okay. The example is what I mean. This was okay. Because you have to write the past tense. So they already give it to you. So that was my mistake. So what you're going to do is you identify the verb that it's in the past, and then you're going to change that to the future. Okay, that's what you're going to do in that section. Then when you go to the triangle part, you're going to write the past tense and the future tense of each verb in parentheses. So we have watch. Again, this is pretty much answers only. You look at the verb in exercises 7 through 11. You look at the verb in parentheses, and then there we go. Time's up, huh? Remember the sound? Okay. Then you are going to look at the verb in parentheses, and you are going to form the past tense and then the future tense. Okay, so for the circle and the triangle part, it's pretty much answers only, where you have to identify the past tense verb and then change it to future. And for the triangle part, you have to change it into the past and also the future tense. In the square part is where you guys are going to have to write a bit more, because you are going to rewrite the sentences, the sentence in the square section, using verbs in the past tense and the future tense. So for example, people write many stories about Captain Kidd. You identify the verb write, and then you know that you have to change it to the past. People wrote many stories about Captain Kidd, and then you have to rewrite the sentence. Yes, you have to rewrite the sentences for the past and for the future. So people wrote many stories about Captain Kidd. You write it, and then you rewrite it. People will write many stories about Captain Kidd in the future tense. Notice that wrote is an irregular verb. We're not working with those, but they decided to use in the examples. I'm looking at the sentences now, and they're all regular verbs, so you guys won't have a problem. Okay, so I hope that you understand. Read carefully. Look at the second part of the examples. Okay, this is what you guys have to do. It's pretty much answers only, the past and the future. Here again, the past and the future, and here you have to rewrite the sentences using the past tense and also using the future tense. But yes, you do have to rewrite it. There are 5 sentences, so you, at the end of this section, you will have 10 sentences. 2 for number 12, 2 for number 13, 2 for number 14, 2 for number 15, and 2 for number 16, because you have to write the sentence using the past tense and then the sentence using the future tense. Okay, so guys, I love you. If you have any questions, email me. I'll see you later. Bye.